Thank you. This is it's a very much a work in progress, so as you can see, the title is different than the one that was in the program. I came to be interested in soils through a unusual path in a way. For the last 4 years, I've been doing like an ethnography of the new regulations about mining waste in Chile. And especially focused in the Atacama region. There is a region like 800 kilometers north of Santiago. That it's a region that's still not on the Atacama Desert as such, but it's a mixture of a region in which it houses very strong and historical mining, but also very strong agriculture, especially wineries. And the thing about mining waste in this particular region is the issue that mining waste there, or at least the particular locations in which I've been studying, in which I've been doing research, that mining waste has been there for at least 150 years. It came from silver mining at the very end of the 19th century, and it has been located in these valleys, very next all the places in which all the agriculture has been developing since then. And since then, without any care or anything, has become part of the environment, has become part of the soil in a way. So as soon as you start doing, or you become interested in mining waste in these particular areas, you, by default, more or less, you become interested in soil there. Because soil is mining waste has become part of the soil of these valleys, in particular the valley and the locations in which I've been doing research. And the striking thing for me is that as soon as I realized that I was becoming interested in soil and soil matters, I started reading the soil literature, especially the soil, this emerging field of the soil and culture, soil and society, etc. And everything that I read there, or almost everything, I talk about life, talk about nurturing things, talk about the things growing, and I didn't see anything very much related to what I was seeing, that it's very toxic soils. So, and the thing that struck me, and I'm going to show you one picture, is the issue that there's very little to love about soils of biome in a very conventional way. It's the issue that the people, for example, the people living beside the site, very much on the back, you can see the place in which the wineries, the wineries are located. Most of the people there, it's not very much engaged in trying to live with soil and do something. They are very much engaged trying to escape from soil as much as they can. They cover the houses in different kinds of different materials. They want to go to the city. They want to cement the whole back of the house, and they're very scared about soil. So this realization made me put the challenge here. The challenge about trying to think in another kind of vitality of soil, what I call the soil toxic vitalities. I define this toxic vitality in a very like, I don't know, general way. It's a vitality that for its own emergence can already diminish other vitalities, human, animals, geological in a way. I think for me the sort of pathological, you can say in a way that this kind of vitality of soil is not only against human beings and against animals and plants, but also against all the kind of soil that lives there for or that have been developed there for a long time. What is interesting for me about thinking in terms of toxic vitality is this sense of this contradiction in terms of the notion, and that for me it is very much clear in the sort of dictionary definition of vitality, because the first meaning of vitality is the state of being strong and active. Yeah, and this soil is very strong and active. It has a lot of metals, a lot of arsenic, and the arsenic is very good at moving and reproducing itself. But but on the other hand, it's a vitality that goes against the second meaning, the second like dictionary meaning of vitality, the power of giving continuance of life present in all living things. So this contradiction in terms for me is very, very interesting and very like, I don't know, well, interesting. So what for me, it's also something to highlight. Is the notion that this toxic vitality tend to go in parallel with nurturing ones, the more traditional ones of soil being the foundation of life. And this is like a very conventional thinking in toxicology, in which you can have plants in a field, but the field is still heavily polluted for other kind of beings. So nurturing and toxic vitalities go hand in hand in a lot of in a lot of these places. And well, this is this increasingly prominent kind of vitality for soils in the Anthropocene, and I think especially in places like Babylon, in a lot of places who have historical mining or historical industrial activity, a lot of the soils has this toxic vitality in a way. Then and this is mostly my talk is how do we deal with this with this such toxic vitalities, and usually what we have, the kind of knowledge that we have, it's on the one hand, of course, it's buried. There is a lot of things of knowing these ways. But I'm particularly interested in one kind that what I call what can become the regulatory soil science, or regulatory science regarding toxic soils in a way. Mostly in my particular case, toxicology, and now I'm moving my project to also to explore like other kind of like proper soil science dealing with waste. And my case in particular is the enactment of the first proper regulations about toxic soils in Chile in the last 10 years. And what the people trying to do there, they have been importing mostly from the US this environmental risk assessment framework, and trying to apply it to the issue of toxic or very polluted soils in Chile. And as usual with this kind of like very heavy science-based frameworks, the usual frame or what you see on the guideline is that you have to produce knowledge through this detachment of the conventional Western detachment between the knower and the known. But the thing is that as soon as I started doing fieldwork, and I've been following the different stages of the whole process for the last 3 years, I realized that and I've been doing research in a particular laboratory that's very central in Chilean environmental regulation, that is called CELMA, that stands for Centro Nacional del Medio Ambiente, National Center for the Environment. And as soon as I start going to the laboratory to see how the people in the laboratory deal with samples of soil from this particular area in order to know their toxicity, I realized, or the chemists there told me that they cannot do anything with the soil by seeing it from the distance. They cannot do, or they cannot produce any kind of knowledge from the soil by only reading or extracting knowledge without doing something to the soil. So before any proper lectura, they talk all the time about reading all the time about can be carried out. The sample must be digested and diluted. And this principle of this way of knowing connect me with this notion of geophagic knowing that I'm trying to think with. Geophagy is the practice by human and animals of consuming soil. It's a quite well-known practice in the so-called global south, especially among pregnant women and children, depending on multiple factors, and usually censored because of its health risk. You can see there my son Manuel, who is a very keen geophager, you can say. He's very good for the worry of his parents. So geophagic knowing it's to know soils through their ingestion dilution. Does not rely solely on the touch side, but also on the intimate contact and mutual affectation between the knower and the known. Geophagic knowing tends to transform even radically both the object being known and the knower. It's always intermingled with multiple forms of valuation, several of them of ethical character. And what for me it's very important, and the people of the lab was very focused on letting me know is that these things is particularly important for soil samples. It's not the same with water, air, because the way they said they have much more capabilities to study air samples or water samples in a sort of direct way, but with soil they have to transform it a lot. So which kind of transformation that I'm talking about? And right now, given that I don't have so much time, I'm going just to show you very small vignettes from my field materials without going too much into it. So the red parts are the parts that for me are important. This is a chemist talking. What we prepare here is aqua regia that kills all the organic matter. As I say, it destroys all the organic matter. It's a mixture of hydrochloric acid, hydrochloric acid, and nitric acid. For analyzing, you have to kill all the organic matter to leave all the metals free. It cannot take organic matter, and then you can read by ICP and determine the total metals on the sample. So to destroy something is very much at the heart of knowing. This is the centrality of the digestion principle. So we can move very briefly to the reading. The reading was made mostly in an instrument called the ICP, that is a shorthand for inductively coupled plasma mass spectrometry. That is an instrument that is at the very center of knowing the toxicity of these particular soil samples in the lab. And another of the chemists said to me, this is an emission equipment. I mean, it detects emission. Then the analyte, the electron of the analyte absorbs energy, got excited, changed its energy state, and he has more energy, isn't it? But his stable state, and not that it's a very like masculine kind of construction of the entity. His stable state is the relaxed state, not excited. Then as much as he excites, he tends to relax, as it is called, and to emit the absorbed energy. I mean, we force him, we excite him, but against his will. But his natural state is relaxed. Then he emits, and that emission is what we detect. Another vignette. Marcus is explaining to me how do they read the outputs of the ICP. He showed me a chart that the one that is on the picture, on which each line is a particular analyte commenting me. There are cases in which these things happen this way, showing me a section in which two lines are very close. This is called signal interference, and in the validation, you have to discriminate and isolate the problematic ones. Then he adds angrily, the most obvious ones are calcium and iron. They really like to pass other component frequencies. The second part of the process is the whole the proper risk analysis. And one analyst, when describing me like the logic behind what he does with the risk analysis, he described it in this particular way. It depends a lot on the analyst criteria. It's like lawyers on a trial, maybe. Here's the same, because the same thing on a different place can have completely different results. Why? Because they show different evidence. It's the same here. If you change certain kind of exposition to toxics, it can go completely the other way around, and you can say, no, there's no risk here, and there is a mess. So some temporary conclusions. In contrast with, I will just read. In contrast with traditional scientific objectivists, geophytic knowledge presents source toxic knowledge production as a messy, warm, and intimate process, crisscrossed by multiple agencies and ethical evaluation. This is well, this is not that new, probably. However, this is still knowing an unequal power-based relationship. It's something that is some sort of a violence that we could accept on the process. One possible alternative is trying to think. What I'm trying to think now it's trying to develop a new politics of bioavailability. It's difficult to pronounce it. But one of the most important things that I learned from the way the people see the soil toxicity in the lab is what they show that concentrations for them are almost meaningless. What is important for them is bioavailability, is how much of these metals in the soil and the dynamics of the metals can be absorbed by living entities and mostly human beings. So what I'm trying to think about is the issue of trying to extend and to transform this notion of bioavailability in a proper politics, in which you extend the bios in a way to include not only human beings, because it's very much anthropogenic, the whole process, and also you extend the notion of the availability, not only in terms of toxic relations, but also nurturing ones. And you see the process as working hand in hand for the whole time. So my last general conclusion is that we need to develop a sort of symmetrical approach to soils and caring in the Anthropocene. Not only to care for soils, but also to take care from soils, from certain kind of soils that might hurt us. Understanding us in the broadest sense, human beings, animals, plants, and even other kinds of soils. As researchers and practitioners, this move does not mean necessarily to end our emotional attachment to soils, but at least to temper its current quasi-romantic character. So, thank you.
Again, I will give you self-facilitated questions.
Yeah, of course.
I'm sure there will be many.
I missed the toxic part.
Huh?
I missed the toxic. Why is it toxic? Why can it be toxic? Why can it be still cannot reconcile?
Yeah. It mostly because or I see it as a very vital chemical relationship that made the soil, for example, very resilient or the high metals concentration very resilient to disperse, and they got very, they remain very strongly united. For example, arsenic or mercury with the passage of time. So as soon as someone or ingest or someone deal with this particular patch of soil, is going to get affected in a way in their own vitality. So it's mostly connected with the issue of how resilient it's this very high concentration of metals in particular patches of soil.
So it is vital, toxic is for us and vital is for it. When toxic is for us.
But for us in a sort of a very extended way, it's also it's very sort of, or trying to think about it, even for other kind of soils, like sort of the agricultural soils that are used, they become very much affected by this kind of vitality of the soil. Yeah. Okay.
There were people ahead of me, I think, but I'm happy to. So I think there's something that struck me in what you presented that links very nicely to what we heard from Salvatore yesterday, and from Jermaine around the idea that, and you didn't say, but I think there's also a step of you talk about destroying the soil to taste it. There's a real destruction that happens, and it's linked to what Jermaine said about taking the soil from its context in the first place. So the sampling of the soil, even before you take it to the laboratory and begin to do it, already takes it away from its context. And so to understand its role in both toxicology and in vitality, we need to put it back into its context, which is where Salvatore was with us with our urban gardening. But we need to be able to take the context of a whole range of other things, so that just the number we come from the destruction only makes sense if we put it back into its context with the pH, with the way the land's being used and so on. And it just struck me as you were talking that perhaps that framing of the story is a nice one to add to the way perhaps you might tell the story, because I think you have the data to put those levels of context back together, and then perhaps to challenge the very simple contaminated land framework that says the only way we study contaminated land is to take these very simple samples and take them to destroy them and then make them. Yeah. So I don't.
I totally agree. Actually, just one thing from there is that this lab was located 800 kilometers south of the base and with no connection whatsoever.
No. So I don't think the lab could do it, but I think there's a real job for the framework of analysis to somehow take the real context along with the numbers into account. And that's a real challenge for development in this kind of framework.
So, I see that you're doing a lot of work to take technical concepts and practices and using them as an analytic ethnographically, which I think is really interesting. And I wondered if you had ever done the work or had been asked by the scientists to do the work back of performing your ethnography back to them to get their feedback on the way that you're conceptualizing the scientific concepts and the practices that you see in the lab, and if that is any useful exercise in how they can think about ways to communicate what they're doing out to other publics, or has that not been yet an aspect of the research?
Yeah, I think my initial aim was definitely to do something like that, but the problem is that this, well, and it's also the part of a larger story, is this particular institution, it's a very, very like sort of collapsing institution right now. So, and a lot of the chemists, because I did this particular part of the work, it was done like almost 3 years ago, and most of the people who was involved there, it's not longer on the lab, and actually, well, I can tell you that the whole story is very, very messy, but it also tells a story about the kind of these regulatory frames that tend to work relatively well in the US and made by the EPA, the former EPA, but not the EPA right now, and when you move them to other places in which the sort of frames for these regulatory science they're non-existent, more or less.
Yeah. No, it looked on one of the pictures like there was some culture further down the side. Was it vine or something like this? I was wondering if you looked at how the people who grow these things relate to the toxicity of the site and how they live with these toxic soils, and if there's any interesting things to compare between science.
Yeah, I think the stage that I'm starting right now in the project, it will involve also the people in the binaries surrounding these particular areas. But anyway, the sampling process involved these fields as well. They made like a very large. Well, they have a methodology in which you have to involve not only sort of the site that you realize it as a toxic one, but also all the areas surrounding it. So all of these samples are either from the site, but also from the agricultural fields surrounding it in an area like 2 kilometers more or less around the hotspot of.
So they participate in
They only participated in allowing the sampling team to go into the field. The only participation was the.
I'm thinking about something that from yesterday that started since we went to the park and we started something, and then we have dug this hole and the question started in the video with that's a story or a story. And it comes in German's work with these urban soils and not soils, and it runs through your presentation also the question of, for instance, when you show us a picture and you say, the people here are trying to run away from soil because it gets everywhere and they are trying to get out of their houses. And my immediate, naive reaction is like, that's the soil that's dirt getting into their houses, and it's precisely because the soil has been mistreated and obviously it's also very dry soil and that doesn't necessarily have to have been done by humans or whatever, but the soils you're talking about have been extremely mistreated and destroyed and toxified or killed in many other ways. So I think while I completely see what you're trying to tell us, that what does it mean to try to restore soil, talk about soil nurturing, and each of these ethnographic engagements of what is used to seen here, you can see that in every one of these contexts, we need to think the question of what's the soil differently. And I think I was wondering how we keep coming back to this, is that soil and soil, and what is the soil here, and what's the life in it and the death in it. So I find it, I don't know if it's a question or I'm going to have to say that that's a question that comes to me. That is a very important one.
No. Yeah, definitely. I think I was thinking two things. The one that I probably choose a very unhappy picture to show the field, because I only choose in the place in which there was nothing. But as soon as you go in another direction, you will see that it was a lot of not a lot, but some plants, some farming of all the people living there, or all the people living in this side and around this side. They have some sort of like agriculture for the fields, and another very interesting and sort of cool character of this soil in particular, in this area, in which every 3 or 4 years it rains there, and in spring the whole desert becomes like a proper like a flower clear. That is called the Blue Man Desert, the Desierto Florido. And in this way, I think I agree with that this particular soil is very much on the limit of becoming like proper like earth, dirt, or waste or whatever, and not proper soil. But on the other hand, I personally defend that it's this soil, because it's soil because it's nurtures life. But for me, what's interesting is it is in between character. When it's nurtures life, but also it hurts the people and the other animals living there. So this kind of picture is very interesting.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to cut the question kind of short because otherwise we overrun terribly. But thank you, Sebastian. And I just wanted to make a little note. I'm going to abuse my host privilege and do this all the time. I think what is starting to emerge from the room is this set of questions around what are the minimum functions of the soil? What are the minimum functions that allow us to approach an object and call it the soil? This is my reading, and I'm going to put up a sheet of paper somewhere, and if you feel like contributing your thoughts to that, I think that could be an interesting starting point for further discussions. What is the minimum set of characteristics that allow us to approach a matter and say, yeah, that is soil, as opposed to something else? But thank you, Sebastian Ureta.